Excellent. Right, welcome everybody. We are super excited to have you here tonight. Myself and Ayanda, we'll be introducing her in a second. So thank you for filling out the poll. So let's have a look. We've had quite a few of you, about 64% of you have filled the poll in, so a couple more of you busy doing it now. And the first question was, how old is your little one? And the majority, more than 50% of you, have a 2 to 3 year old. And then some of you, about 30% of you, have got 1 to 2 year olds. So we're very much in the 1 to 3 year old age bracket. And then, of course, there's 7% with others. So that could mean that there's some babies as well. And then I asked, which positive discipline technique do you find most effective with your toddler? And this one was very interesting. So we had 37% and 33%, so pretty equal, was boundaries and offering choices. So I really do like that. Definitely parents with some positive parenting strategies already. And then we had praise, which also works nicely, and rewards, which all go together. 4% were using timeout, and 22 talking through the situation, and 11% who were probably being brutally honest said, nothing's working. And then the final question was, what is your biggest parenting challenge? And this was really like, and it wasn't out of 100 because you could put multiple in. So you've got dealing with defiance or stubbornness, and handling tantrums and emotional outbursts. So all the behavioral stuff were the things that you found challenging. There were some with people who had difficulty with navigating mealtime and bedtime. So there you go. Thank you, everybody. So without further ado, I am super excited about tonight's topic. And before I introduce the topic, I'm going to introduce the person who's going to be speaking alongside me. Ayanda, are you there? Ayanda's going to pop her video on, and then we'll be able to see her as well. While we wait for Ayanda to come on, so let's go back. I'll just wait for her to come on. So positive parenting is, there you are. There you go. How are you doing, Ayanda?
I'm great, thank you. And how's everyone? Hi to everyone.
Hello. So yeah, so maybe down in the bottom, so you can just say to Ayanda and I know, you will see that there's a little chat below. In fact, I've got to enable the chat. Sorry, I always forget this is a new functionality that you have to actually enable chat. So let me enable everybody to be able to chat. There we go. Everybody can chat now. So everybody, Ayanda is in Josie, and I'm actually in the UK at the moment. So where are all of you? Pop into the chat below where you are. Let us know where you're joining us from. And thank you for joining us. For those of you who are in South Africa, you are in a very chilly location right now, I believe. Cape Town, there's quite a few. Cape Town, Joburg, KZN, Stellenbosch. Whoa, lots of rain there. Pretoria, excellent. Lovely to have you all join us. And we've had a really incredible turnout tonight. Very, lots and lots of people all over. And there you go. Jessie says, from a very cold Cape Town. Yes, Centurion, Newlands, Montmarie, you must be very rainy there, if I know Newlands well enough. So thank you all for joining us, and Mel's and Chilly Josie. There's something about the South African houses that we can never heat them well enough. Hey? So we're all battling with it. Right. Okay. So I'm super excited to be talking today about positive parenting. It really is a game changer of a topic in terms of parenting. It is just probably one of the most important topics when it comes to dealing with little ones. And so we're going to be chatting about getting into positive parenting, and we're going to be focusing on how positive parenting nurtures a strong parent-child relationship and also promotes emotional well-being. So all the stuff that's super important to set your little one up for long-term success. Positive parenting is about building deep connections with our kids that involve things like trust and respect and open communication. Of course, there is a very strong focus as well on boundaries as well, and just how important that is, because children need to feel secure within those boundaries. So tonight we're going to learn a little bit about how to communicate with our little one, how to help our little ones with responsible decision-making, and long-term, how this will impact their problem-solving skills as well. In a nutshell, positive parenting is about more than just recognizing how amazing your kid is and building up their self-esteem. It's actually about nurturing their potential, teaching them life skills, and most of all, supporting their emotional growth. And I'm just super excited that tonight we're going to be focusing on the how-to. How are we going to get this done? So for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Meg Fora. I'm an occupational therapist. I have always, my entire life, worked in early childhood. I am absolutely passionate about early childhood development because it does lay the foundation for the rest of your child's life. I'm the author of 8 parenting books, including Baby Sense and Weaning Sense. I'm the founder of the baby app company, Parent Sense, and of course, the co-founder, along with Laura Schoenfeld, of Play Sense. And so I'm super excited to have you here today. And alongside me is a guest who I have been wanting to work with for a very long time. Ayanda is an incredible presence on Instagram, and I certainly do follow your posts as well. So for those of you who don't, please do. Ayanda is a parent coach. She owns the company called The Parent Coach, and she firmly believes in the significance of parenting in shaping a child's life. Through her own experiences with having her own 2 children, she knows what it's like to not be supported, and she also knows what it's like to be supported and to support your own children. And that personal journey is part of what has brought her to where she is. She has a strong commitment to evidence-based practice, and she has a number of qualifications under her belt, including various different education qualifications like Montessori, Reggio Emilia. She's done coaching certification, she's done facilitation certification, and has a BAPP SOCSI as well. And her focus is very much on the fields of human science, child development, and psychology. She has a passionate team at the Parent Coach who are dedicated to empowering parents on their unique parenting journey. Their approach is rooted in CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, and that is how your thoughts influence your behavior, which is very much aligned to what I believe as well, Ayanda. And CBT is an ideal approach for parenting coaching because it focuses on changing patterns of thinking and behavior that contribute to parenting challenges. So I'm really, really excited to have you join us here tonight, Ayanda. Thank you so much for joining us. And Ayanda and I are going to tag team tonight. We're going to be going backwards and forwards between us. So super to have you. Right. I also just want to mention that we do have some Excellent. We do have some sponsors here tonight. The Parent Sense app has been one of our media partners, and Babies Are Us. And today we are going to be giving away some prizes. So we're going to be giving away a Positive Boundaries workshop from Parent Sense, as well as a Tech and Tots workshop from Parent Sense, plus 20% off all online masterclasses. And in fact, for that, you can use the Positive Play little voucher code. So Positive Play to get 20% off all online masterclasses. And then Babies Are Us are giving us a 500 Rand gift voucher. So we're super excited about that. And so all you need to do if you want to win that is to go onto your social media handles to do something like what's posted here on the right-hand side. Just take a picture of the screen during one of our sections tonight, and then just pop up a post saying you're watching tonight. And then don't forget, you need to tag Parent Sense. So there you got, Play Sense at playsense_org, at parentsense.app, and at parentsense and at babiesrus.za. So you can quickly just write those down. That's what you're going to do at playsense.org, at parentsense.app, and at babysense.za, at babiesrus.za _ZA, and you can win those amazing prizes. All right, so without further ado, we are going to get started. And I'm going to kick off first with a video that for me encapsulates everything that positive parenting is. Sorry, and I've just realized you've got no sound, so I'm going to quickly just stop sharing and I'm going to reshare my screen. Sorry about this, I need to put sound on. You should have sound now.
Yes, we do.
Yay! Yay! I'm the king of the castle! Good job all by yourself.
And that for me just encapsulates everything that positive parenting is. That mother must have been standing there with her heart in her throat, wondering if her child was going to fall, but fully allowing them to go for it and then positively reinforcing. And I think that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about tonight. So we know that behind every child is a parent, behind every young child who believes in himself is a parent who believed first, and that's you. And so what we're going to be covering off today is why positive parenting matters, how technology influences positive parenting and emotional development, how outside influences on your child's life impact emotional development, the power of play, discipline, and then what happens next. So I'm going to, first of all, to kick off, I'm going to hand over right as we start to Ayanda, and she's going to talk about why positive parenting is important.
Thank you so much, Meg. Oh my gosh, I think being a mother to a young little child, a father, I work a lot with a lot of fathers, is the most beautiful experience. And I think what's really important for me in my journey in terms of parenting is just being understanding what my role here is. And for me, you know, being a single mom, raising both my children all by myself all this time has been such an exciting and interesting and challenging experience, in that, you know, I've had to be very deliberate in understanding what my purpose is, and being deliberate in saying, what's my intention around this whole parenting thing? So positive parenting has just been the best in terms of answering that call, because, you know, I want my children to be independent, to hopefully one day, very soon, move out and go into the world so I can live and go partying all night. You know, and experience a whole lot of things. But what is important is that for me, this whole experience around my parenting and the parenting styles that I've chosen to adopt, and the type of things that I teach my parents, are meant to empower us so that we think about almost futuristically, how is it going to look at the end of the road? You know, you are sitting there with your 12-month-old baby, with your 16-month-old baby, but that's just the beginning. You know, what is the end product? And I think it's so important that we are always thinking about that, because then it determines the decisions, day-to-day decisions that we make for our children, what kind of investment in terms of time that we put into them. And just to give you a quick one in terms of what my parenting tool look like in terms of this positive parenting. Just talking firstly, you know what, imagine you're going to the shed or your garden or the car, for instance, whatever you need to go to, or the kitchen for that matter, and you need to cook something. You know, you need to use the right tools. You need to have the right tools for whatever you're going to do in terms of your objective. And I think of parenting exactly as that. You know, we have different parenting styles. We have our children have different temperaments. It's a whole lot. It's like a whole stew. But if we have certain things that we are very clear about and we're consistent about, it's very important that we bear that in mind. So when I talk about care and how it's so important to do things like, you know, your physical warmth that we give to our child. I mean, we saw that video. You know, the reinforcement is not just saying something. It's actually being able to embrace our children and give them that feeling of, I see you, I hear you, which is very important for our children's mental health in the long run. I mean, there's very much clear studies that show now that a lot of the things that happen in the childhood has a long-term effect on our children in the future. So we want to make sure that when it comes to that love and the cared for and the feeling heard, they know that we always have their backs, you know. And I think the other thing that we always talk about, and sometimes becomes a problem, because as parents, we're also going through stuff. We're going through adulting. I mean, goodness, it's so hectic. And we want to really be deliberate about being consistent. So whatever the rules we're setting up, when we say no, when we start putting up chores, you want to make sure that as a parent, whatever those rules are, you're sticking to that. And almost like on a day-to-day basis, you're making sure that your child has an expectation and knows that this is what happens if you don't do as mom told you, you know, whatever that is. And hopefully everyone is obviously clear about how exactly you're disciplining your child. I know, you know, the ages of 12 months to 18 months, you know, there's a little bit of a limit in terms of having a real conversation, but remember, our children are watching us in terms of our body language, in terms of our facial expressions, and they're reading us all the time. So even in that consistency, even just knowing that we just have the time for them, so important. I'll talk more about the choices and the consequences when we get to the discipline. But really, I think the reason for me that this care and consistency matters is that when we give our children the platform to say, I want to hear you, I want to see you, and you matter, we almost like giving them the key to the whole world. Because everywhere that they're going to show up, they're going to show up knowing that they are loved, they are adored, they want to be listened to, the whole 9 yards. So when we talk about that whole intentionality that I mentioned, now I really would like for you as a parent to think about, what is your intentions when it comes to your child rearing? What is the objective of every single the bigger picture. So the bigger picture, and what does it mean in terms of what you're doing every day towards building to that? I remember when my son was very young, we started from very young age, the kind of conversations that we had. I always gave him conversations that were a little bit above him in terms of his maturity. And now that he's a 15-year-old, I know that I have an amazing young man. And I was very deliberate in terms of building towards that, So even with my daughter, very clear about wanting her to be a very independent young woman who sees the world as her oyster and just can do anything. And how I raised her, whispering her to her ears, both of them every day, you have unlimited potential. What does that, and then constantly talking about that. What does that mean to you? And what does it, constantly just like revving them up, almost like delusionally, you can do anything, whispering in their ear, asking them random times of the day, what does it mean, baby, when I say you have unlimited potential? And now, 10 years later, I can see that evidence. So it's really, really important that I think if you take anything away from this, be very deliberate, have a big plan, a bigger picture plan, and say, listen, because we're working towards this bigger goal, this is what we're going to do. Whether it's the building of the independence in terms of discipline, whatever board games that you're playing with your child, or toys, if you want them to be more like a maths genius, yeah. I know my time is a bit up now, so yeah. Don't want to go too much there.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. So, I love the way that you talk about telling children that they have unlimited potential. It is so important. So moving on to having a look a little bit at, understanding that children do need to be raised to feel powerful. I want to have a look at one of the potential risks when it comes to positive parenting, and that would be the risk of technology. And I think that this is one of the things that comes up for many parents as a question is, yes, I think my child is amazing. Yes, I'm giving them all the right messages, but I'm not the only influence in their life. And of course, technology is one that really has massive influences, and that is particularly going on into the older child's life. But right from being a toddler, from being a little one, from 1 year old onwards, technology can impact negatively. Now, how does that happen? Well, one of the most key pieces, one of the biggest pieces of developing a child's self-esteem and kind of impacting their success for life is helping them to develop self-regulation. And self-regulation is the ability of a human being to be able to manage very big emotions. And that's a big piece of positive parenting, is making sure little ones can actually identify their emotions and then can manage their emotions. And for many of you who filled out the poll at the beginning, that's actually your challenge. It's the temper tantrums, it's the behavior outbursts. It's those very big emotions that are turning into very big behaviors. For little ones, one of the biggest challenges of this early period of life is to actually learn to self-regulate those big emotions so that you can manage them in the big world. Now, how does that happen? And what is the role of positive parenting when we start to talk about self-regulation? So what I'm doing here is I'm building you a picture of why self-regulation is important, and then we'll go on to why technology undermines it. But in terms of developing self-regulation, which is the secret source of long-term success in life in many respects, and of self-esteem, there are three pieces that kind of have to go into place as your little one starts to develop self-regulation. So the first thing, and they're all things that happen in the context of a relationship. So if you look at all three of these steps to developing self-regulation, they happen in the context of a relationship, and that's the relationship usually between you and your child, or potentially a nanny and your child, or a granny, or potentially a school and your child. So there'll always be an adult figure who's sitting there alongside your child who is developing their self-regulation. So the three things that develop self-regulation, the first one is reflective parenting. And I just absolutely love this photograph, because this mommy and her child are having a real connection. And when this happens out of interest, every single neural pathway that's going through the mother's head is fully mirrored in her baby's neural pathways in their brain. It's called mirror neurons. And the mum and the baby are really connecting and feeling the same emotions in a big way. And you can actually feel it in this picture, which I completely adore. Now, reflective parenting is the ability of a parent to reflect on a child's emotions and on the state that underlies a behavior. So, for instance, if your little one is throwing a massive temper tantrum, and a reflective parent will step back and go, okay, so hold on, what's just happened? When last did they eat? How tired are they? And like what's going on? Is this hangry? Is this frustrated? Is this, I'm just flexing my muscles and my strong will? So reflective parenting recognizes that there is a state or an emotion that underlies a behavior. And that's the very first step around developing your child's emotional world and self-regulation. The second step is that you will then give your child the narrative, which means giving them the words for how they're feeling. So I can see that you're feeling really hungry, and that's why you are, hitting daddy as he walks in through the door, or throwing yourself on the floor in Pick and Pay, or whatever it is. So giving your child the narrative for what they're feeling is a very, very important part, because when a child can identify their emotions and can own their emotions, they then are going to be a more emotionally connected person, which is one of the byproducts of this positive parenting. A third piece of positive parenting, and I know that Ayanda has already dealt with it and is going to come back to it again when she talks about discipline, is the concept of boundaries. And little ones really, really need boundaries. And a story that I often use to illustrate this is a piece of research that was done where they took a group of toddlers, big group of toddlers, and they split them into two groups on a field. And around the one group, they put each group with their parents. And so there were mummies and kiddies over there, and daddies and mummies and kiddies over there. And around the one set of kiddies, they put a fence, a little white picket fence, quite wide, quite far away. And around the other ones, they put no fence. And then they wanted to see how far the children would go from their parents. And they found that the little ones who had the fence around them actually went further. They went all the way up to the fence. They tried to push it over. They tried to climb over it. They were fully engaged with this fence and these boundaries. Whereas the little ones who didn't have any boundaries circled much closer to their parents and didn't explore as much. And that's one of the illustrations for why boundaries are so important, because little ones like boundaries. They like to come up against boundaries to be able to test them and to be able to flex their little muscles and then to work out, because it's safe to work out how they can explore the world. They don't feel as safe when there are no boundaries. So those three things are the secret sauce in developing self-regulation: being a reflective parent, giving your child the narrative, and then giving them boundaries. And boundaries are also important because when little ones have boundaries, they have to learn to self-regulate their behavior. So when you say, no, we are not going to, you have to wear your seatbelt, they have to be able to start to self-regulate the fact that they want to throw a complete temper tantrum and arch their back and push out of the car seat, but they can't do it. And so they learn to self-regulate their behavior. And so boundaries are part of what allows children to learn self-regulation. So as I mentioned, these are the three pieces that are part of developing self-regulation. There's a lot more to it, but those are three very important parts. And I've mentioned that those three things can only develop in the context of a loving relationship. And so here you can see down at the bottom, I have mentioned real time versus technology. So if you think about a relationship being something that's real time, and here you can see it like beautifully encapsulated in this photograph, that this is a real-time connection where a mother and a child are connected with each other. The fact of the matter is that cannot happen with technology. And the reason is that it doesn't matter how fancy the technology is. And of course, maybe one day AI will prove this wrong. But so far, there is no technology that can fully read human emotion by visually watching their face and respond in the moment timelessly. So, the way that we are so nuanced in our behavior with people. We watch such subtle language, body language, and nonverbal skills as we respond to each other. And technology just simply can't do that. But there are other reasons why technology are not good for self-regulation. Technology has been shown to decrease the amount of attention span that a child has. It also stops them from being able to self-regulate because it dumbs them down. And I know you've all done this because I've done it and all parents do it and don't feel terrible for it. But your child throws a temper tantrum. They don't want to sit in their car seat or whatever it is. They're in a restaurant. What's the first thing you do? You reach for your cell phone and you hand it over. And as you do that, they take the phone and they're down inside it and whoops, they're gone. And what you've done in that moment is, yes, you've regulated the behavior, but there was no self-regulation in that. It was very much externally mediated regulation done by a cell phone. And so technology dumbs down emotions. It stops children being able to express their emotions and be in touch with their emotions. And all of that is part and parcel of self-regulation. So the reality is, and I know you're all using technology, and I did too, and if we're honest with ourselves, we all use it more than we should. But I want you to just be aware of the fact that overuse of technology, particularly in the formative years, in the first 3 years of life, really will affect your child's ability to self-regulate. So what can you do about it? Before I hand back over to Amanda, let's quickly look at 3 quick tips about managing technology. These are the 3 quick tips. And if you want more information on this, go and do the Tech and Tots course. It's an amazing course inside the Parent Sense app. But this is something that you need to think about. The 3 C's of responsible tech use. The first one is curb the time. Like, you've got to watch how much time. If your child is under 1 year old, it's no time at all. If your child is over 1 year old, it's kind of 10 minutes per year of their life. So in other words, if they're 1 year old, it's 10 minutes per day. If they're 2 years old, it's 20 minutes per day, but absolute maximum. Try and keep it to as limited as possible and use it when you need it. I know that you're going to need it because you're going to need a babysitter when you're trying to get something off the stove and there's nobody else around, and you're going to quickly pop on some TV or an iPad or YouTube for them, but just curb the time, number 1. Second thing is, curate the content. Always be conscious of what you're having your little one watch. If it's not something that you want to watch, then it's not worth your child watching it. And there are videos and little stories that are fabulous for little ones and teach so many lessons. I mean, really amazing little programs. And then there's a whole lot of rubbish as well. So if you don't want to watch it, your child shouldn't be watching it. And then the third step is to create the context, which is to actually watch alongside your child. And when you do that, it becomes more like reading a story to your child. So you can reflect on what's happening on Peppa Pig and talk about what Peppa Pig's feeling or whatever it is, so that you can actually really create context for your little ones. So all I'm trying to say here is be very conscious as you parent your little one in terms of the technology that they have access to. So with that, we are now going to move on and we're going to talk a little bit about outside influences, because obviously your internal influences inside your home are things like technology, and then there's more internal influences, which is you. But now we're going to hand over back to Ayanda, because she's going to talk a little bit about those influences that are also going to really mold your child. You've got a certain responsibility to mold your child, but what else can mold your child, Ayanda?
So, as our children grow, they obviously start to look at the world and other people, so that they can almost like see their own place in the world. And it's so important for us as parents to try and find as many opportunities to really get on the ground. I know that we hate it when kids take things and put them in their mouths, but listen, this is how they learn. So, making sure obviously that the contents of whatever they're playing with is clean, that it's the right size as well, so that when they put it in their mouths, they can swallow it and stuff like that is very important. But for children, that experience of touching and putting in their mouth is literally, especially the little babies, is how they learn. But as they grow older, start to be the toddlers, we really have to start letting them off the chain a little in terms of just allowing them to play around. I think it's very important that you consider your own personal situation in terms of Where can you take your child to play? You know, what's your affordability? What is like the reality of your situation? Like, where do you go where you will be able to just spend quality time with your child? Another thing that's very important for me in terms of that is this kind of circles that we build around ourselves. It's so important that if you are a mom and you have a 12-month-old baby, a 18-month-old baby, 3-year-old baby, you find other people who have babies who are around about the same age. Because when you want to do certain things, you have a little group of moms who are going to be your support, and wherever you guys go, you're going to actually be able to have some little bit of fun, if that's possible at all, for those, you know, for our little children when they're at that age. But what's really important is these little experiences that we start exposing our children to actually help them see themselves in this beautiful world of the adults. And it's so important that we give them as much experiences as they can, give them as much safe experiences as they can, look at things like your development milestone and be clear to say, in terms of my child, this is where they are, and what are the different type of things that we can play around that are safe for them at that particular age. And read up. You know, a lot of us, I mean, I give like claps to everyone. You all deserve like a on your shoulder for just being here. For me, this parenting journey is such an important job that I wish people could actually go fill out forms first before they can just, bring a baby home, because I think it's such an important role in terms of this young people that we are raising, the influence that we bring. There's so much to parenting, and our children and their grandchildren and our grandchildren will depend on everything we do with this child. So it's so important. And I think that one of the things that we really need to think about is just, as your child's personality shapes up, you're going to see, okay, my child likes more of this. Maybe keep a diary, maybe keep a journal, and just allow them to explore, allow them to be comfortable. And the more you familiarize them with something. So let's say, for instance, your child likes trucks, or they like whatever, do a lot more of that and teach them, what is that truck called? Is that a fire bridge? What, you want to play around with that kind of thinking, where now you're just helping your child so that when they finally have those first few words. I remember with my children, when they were very young, we were very much into doing the sounds that things make, whether we're doing like a farm theme where they'll have the toys, before I would say it's a cow, I would do the sound like it's a moo, it's a meh, and it was just like such a fun way of just getting them to experience and enjoy and learn, of course, because then when they would see it, they would first, before they had the actual words, they'd first make those cute little sounds, which just shows me obviously that they're learning. And I just really, in terms of just moderation, make sure that in terms of those experiences, you try to balance it out. As your child grows, they will want to do a lot more playing, but maybe there's a chance where they can also learn. When you are home, I know that like the time to go back to work is about 3-6 months. So a lot of us will have gone back to work. The other thing that I think that's very important is to make sure that whether you have a nanny, helper, your grandmother, who's there at home giving you the support, that you're very deliberate about the time that you actually spend with your child, So being realistic, we can't always just be there watching them all the time. But if you are very deliberate to say 15 to 30 minutes every day at least, where you're just going to sit down and do something with them, read a book, those cute little books that you can pull up and have all these different characters, and maybe even theme it out. But obviously consider, as I said, you don't want to be now buying everything just because you're feeling this pressure to theme things out. Consider your own personal situation. If your budget doesn't allow you to buy too many things, buy in moderation and find ways to just make it creative and make it fun. Our children are not sitting there grading us on the prams that we bought them, the cost of all these things, but they actually just want that time, that intimate time that we're spending with them, those little magical moments that we have, which will show them obviously years later and say, listen, this is what we did that one time. And it's just beautiful, beautiful memories.
I really love that, Ayanda. I mean, I think that the main theme is time in what you was talking about. And, you know, I mean, if I think back to my previous slide, the main theme was on making it real. So being in relationship, and you talking about making, spending time with your child. And, you know, I mean, it's an interesting concept, quality time, quantity time. What is more important? And I'd love to know what you think on that. I mean, is it important how much time you're spending, or is it that when you're spending time with them that you're really focused, or is it actually both?
It's a bit of both, but I think the quality time is more important, because then you almost like putting your phone aside and you're saying, okay, what do you want? You know, they'll do the flip overs and keep saying, Mommy, look, I'm doing this, I'm getting better at this. And then you give them that reinforcement, which comes back to that whole thing that he spoke about around mental health, feeling like, listen, I matter. Someone is looking at me, I'm important. When I ask, I'm heard.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, fabulous, fabulous. So that kind of segues very beautifully on into play. And if you have got any questions, anybody, please just do pop it up in the Q&A or in the chat. We will try and get to a couple at the end. But I just want to now speak a little bit about the power of play. So we've spoken about being in a relationship with your child and how technology can't do that. We've spoken about time. And now we're going to talk about play. And play is without question the most important strategy that we have, the children have to learn from. I mean, they do most of their learning and their processing actually in play. And that's actually why, of course, at Play Sense, that's what we prioritize. Then there are a couple of reasons why play is so important. So first of all, play actually is the magic that happens in little ones' brains. It's the place it's a time in which they're able to express and process emotions. And a lot of what happens, and particularly in play therapy, a lot of anger can come up, a lot of processing happens. And so a child who's in play is actually processing an enormous amount. So play is very important in terms of expressing and processing emotions. It's also very important in terms of emotional regulation as well. And it's when children are playing that they learn to actually practice emotional regulation, and they learn to navigate through different emotional states. So I'm very cross today with, whatever, an imaginary play thing that's happening. And that type of thing is very important, because they can express emotions and anger and be somebody that they're not in a very, very safe space. When they play socially, they learn to regulate their responses. So, somebody, and particularly when children play together, somebody will frustrate them. They wanted to play with the red truck, and now somebody's taken the red truck. And as in that moment of play, they have to learn to start to self-regulate their behavior and their emotions. So it's very important for the development of emotional regulation. It also builds resilience, because in play, things don't always go according to plan, and particularly in imaginary play, which of course is very important and very central in the Play Sense curriculum. So we believe that imaginary play is the secret to developing a whole set of super skills. But one of those what we call super senses is actually building resilience. And that's because things will happen in play that don't go according to plan. And then, of course, confidence and mastery. When we are playing, we repeat things over and over again. And the reason we repeat things over and over again is that play releases some feel-good hormones in our brain and makes us feel good. And so because we're feeling good, we do it again. And because we do it again, we then achieve mastery. And you see that with a little one who's learning to kick the ball or push the ball away from them, or climb up and down things. I mean, if you've ever watched a little toddler crawl up and down a set of stairs, you'll watch how they really, in that moment of play and that moment of activity, they develop mastery. And through mastery, they develop confidence. And so there's this entire cycle that goes on of play, reward, do it again, master, and then confidence. And it's the cycle that goes round and round for little ones as they play. So play is incredibly important. It helps them to express emotions, it builds resilience, and it also develops self-confidence through mastery. In addition to that, play is critically important for social connections. And from about 18 months onwards, little ones do need to have little playmates to play with. It doesn't mean that you need to push your child into school. One of the questions I often get asked is, at the right age to start children at school? It doesn't have to be too young, but children do need to have the opportunity for social interactions. So if you're not going to send your little one to a play group or to school, they need to have the opportunity to be able to go to something like Nanny and Me or Clamber Club, or go and visit their friend. And if you live in a community where you've got a lot of children who go to the park together, that type of thing is absolutely wonderful, or if you've got cousins or siblings. But if you don't, then you do want to consider maybe sending your little one to a play group. So what does play teach you and teach you socially? Well, it teaches you to take turns. You've got to wait. It teaches you to negotiate. And that's one of the ways that our language language explosion happens, because we have to use language in order to tell our little friends what we want them to be doing with us. We also have to learn to compromise when we're in a social situation, and we learn empathy, which is recognizing that somebody else has emotions as well and not just bulldozing them. And all of this happens through play and social connection. And then finally, of course, very importantly, as an OT, I cannot leave this out, that play is critically important for learning and social experience and sensory experiences. So the way that the brain works is that synapses are formed and connections are formed between neurons based on sensory experiences, also based on relationship experiences, but definitely based on sensory experiences. And so as a child experiences something like a language, like the spoken word, that goes in through the auditory system and forms the connections in the brain. And so that's just a very obvious one. And that those connections in the brain then bed down both receptive language and then later on expressive language. And this happens extensively in play. So play is super important. So how are you going to get the most out of playtime? So I'm going to give you 5 little tips that you're going to use with your little one tomorrow, because I promise you these are the secrets to getting the best out of playtime. The first one is embrace boredom. Boredom is one of the very best secret tools that play can present. We are all terrified of our children being bored. And, you know, I can remember when my kids were much younger, and Ayanda, I'm sure that you sometimes have it, that they'll come up and they'll go, I'm bored. What should I do? Do you get that, Ayanda? All the time. So give,
yes.
And part of the reason is that they haven't learned to play on their own because they're being taken care of by technology and they've been entertained all the time. But children need boredom, because what happens when they're bored is it sparks a whole lot of creativity. Because when I'm bored, I have to make something out of nothing. I have to make up a game. I have to make a fort. I have to build something. And all of those things, those building, creating, making, thinking up a game, telling a story, all of that is, of course, the root of creativity. And we do know that one of the skills of the future that's going to be critically important is the skill of creativity. So number one tool, and I want you all to use it tomorrow. I want your toddlers to tell you that they're bored at some time tomorrow, because then you know that you're winning. Second thing is also starts with the B, boxes and blank slates. So boxes are absolutely brilliant. If you ever do get a new tumble dryer or a new television screen, please keep the box, because you can't believe the things that box can become. It can be a rocket ship, it can be a house, it can be a fence, a boundary, a border. It can be so many things. And so boxes are wonderful, because when we use boxes, when little ones use boxes, it becomes a blank slate to be able to create anything. So in terms of toys, boxes are my favorite. The next piece of playtime is physical. You want to balance between physical and screen time. So yes, we understand screen time is going to come into life, and we're not unrealistic that nobody's going to ever touch a screen, but you've got to make sure that there's a lot of physical time along with the screen time, because screen time is simply not playtime. It never is. So for every minute that your child spends watching a screen, it is a minute they're not playing. And that's one of the reasons why we see so many deficits in learning, deficits in language, and deficits in cognitive learning through too much screen use. And so for those of you who are wondering about that side of screen use is a problem, because children don't learn language in the same way, and they don't learn in the same way. So screens, as opposed to teaching children things, actually does the opposite. The next thing about playtime is it's got to happen in real time. Like, it's got to be physically real. And it's a trip to the beach, or a trip to the zoo, or a trip to the farm, like doing real life things with your little one, because that is what gives you the opportunity to really share experience with them. And then finally, and probably I think one of the most important, is, of course, imaginary play, which is what Play Sense is founded on. Giving a child a scenario and a challenge, and letting them come up with what they're going to do, or giving them a prop. So if you've got your little toddler tomorrow and they come and tell you that they're bored, find something lying anywhere around you and say, can we be a, and turn it into something, turning it into a hat for a cowboy, or turning it into a house if it's a box. So can we be a fisherman, or can we be an astronaut, and let them, their minds make up what they're going to do with it. So use the props and give them the scenario to start to initiate imaginary play. A lot of the children who come to play scenes come to us, and the parents complain about the fact that their children can never entertain themselves. And the minute we ignite that imaginary play, the children can entertain themselves, because their best friend becomes their brain and their imagination. So it really is worth spending the time on initiating imaginary play with your little one. Right, so now we're going to go on to how we actually still sit in the camp of positive parenting with a word that feels very negative, of discipline. And I want you to know that actually the definition of discipline is not a negative definition at all. It's a coming alongside somebody, and it's a teaching them. It's not a negative. It does not have to do with punishment. But before I say too much about it, I want to hand over to Ayanda to share her thoughts on discipline and little ones.
Oh, absolutely, Meg. You know, a lot of people think you modern parents, you know, you don't discipline these children. And I always say that, it's just that we don't really understand how. And it's actually very important that we consider the fact that, when we think about the intentionality that I spoke about earlier, the deliberation in terms of this parenting, you're not just parenting your child to be scared of you. You're not just parenting your child to not backchat like they used to say back with us, you get a slap because you backchatted and. For me, what's really important when it comes to that is just being able to understand that as you're preparing your child for the adult world, you are supposed to allow them some kind of freedom. So we basically almost like navigating between what I usually say is the frontline staff, as your parenting role will shift and change gradually, where obviously you're running around, you're putting things away, making sure to protect your child because they're still young and they may not know what they're doing. But when you get to this role of now you have a preteen, you kind of have to be very deliberate about being the support staff now, where you're saying, what do you think? What decision do you think would be the best for you to do? And if you think about it, it almost empowers them in the long run. When now, if they have to actually make decisions when they leave home, and you've given them the practice, and not just always telling them what to do, but asking them, when are you going to do, or what do you want to do? Which one are you going to do first? Do you want to play soccer, or do you want to do art? Allow those kind of choices, because then we allow our children to explore how they feel. One of the things that I hear a lot with young people my age especially, a lot of us will get to your job situations, and we still we're not comfortable to say, this is what I want, even though we are like such adults, because we've almost been trained most of our lives to do what we are told. I think if we want to prepare our children who are going to be the future leaders, the future problem solvers, it's very important, and it starts in the home, this thing of just allowing them to say, what do I like? What do I want to do? And obviously, when we talk about that, we also need to be very cognizant of that your choice also require you to take responsibility, And if you said you're going to do something within 30 minutes, if you said you're going to do something and you didn't do it, that's where the discipline then comes, in terms of how do you speak to your child to say, okay, my baby, I told you to do 1, 2, 3 and you didn't. And when we spoke about this, these are the rules, in terms of if you didn't do your chores, you now have to do them. And I might have to take your phone or whatever. I say phone because, most of us have really done it, Meg, in terms of just using our phones as the pacifier to get away with everything. So even the Wi-Fi is probably, compared to how we were like given a belt, it's the worst punishment you can give these children of today. If you're saying you're taking away their Wi-Fi or their devices, it's like, it's trauma. So it's really important to me that we deliberate in terms of thinking, we are disciplining our children know that they have rights, but they also know that those rights comes with responsibilities. And the sooner we start with that in our homes, the earlier we start with it, then it becomes so much easier later on in life. You know, I work with a high school in my area where we do a lot of this disciplinary stuff where children act and do a whole lot of stuff, behavioral issues. And you can almost tell that in many instances, you know, when children, even in how we as parents treat our children when they do something, you know, we're not so involved in trying to find out, okay, what did you do? Or never mind that part, but almost like, you know, if the year starts, you know, one thing I do with my children is we have a contract where these are the expectations in terms of what are the grades are supposed to be. These are the expectation in terms of the time, the extra time they need to put in. This is the choice. So we're creating this contract like almost together, because obviously they're old enough, you know, they're 10, 15. And then when the semester ends, and this is tomorrow for the young one from the primary, she will be coming home with the report. I need to take out that contract. We need to look at it and see how she performed. I have to deliver on my part if she has done a great job in terms of the rewards that she will be getting, you know, and that's the responsibility of it, whether if she didn't perform, then she doesn't get the reward. But if she performed, she gets the reward. We go on a horse riding experience, which is something she loves very much, you know, and it's very individually tailored as well. So the consequences, the choices, I don't give the choices to everyone in terms of, so I'll look at my individual children and say, okay, for you, this is what we're going to do. For you, this is what we're going to do. Because our children are different and we want to almost make them feel special as well by almost being fair in terms of how we discipline them, in terms of giving them the conversation. Sometimes they'll even come back to say, listen, this is a bit unfair. How come you're doing 1, 2, 3? And I love it when those kind of conversation happens, because it shows that they know that I put in the effort and you're not giving me the reward that you promised me. And I hope that in terms of just the bigger world now, preparing for the bigger world, that they will go out into the world and be able to look at what's worth, that everywhere where they're putting their effort, that they're expecting to be rewarded, and they're able to have those kind of conversations, even with their bosses, hopefully negotiate the salaries way better than I've been able to, you know, so those conversations are so important because they build so many skills, basically.
Very interesting. Super. Yeah, thank you very much. And so moving on, progressing a little bit further, and we are going to answer the questions. I see there are some questions, so I'm going to just move through this last slide very quickly. You know, a lot of the work that we do gets grounded down in the early days in our homes. So from the time your baby is born, they are the center of your world. You build up their self-esteem. You discipline them positively, giving them the boundaries. You manage the technology, and then you give them lots of time for play and so on. So you really start to create this little human being who is self-regulating well, who has a good self-esteem, and who understands their connection with other people, and so their emotional connections. And this is all of what we're doing in the early days. But there will come a day when your little one leaves home. And I think one of the things that I would like to touch on is how you actually choose childcare that is going to kind of follow on that trajectory and going to be able to make sure that your child does, continue on the positive trajectory. So your child's first experience as they leave home really does matter. And one of the important things when you start to look at play groups and play schools is that it must be all about play. If you're walking into a school or into a classroom that looks like it's very rigid, very academic, particularly for children between 2 and 5 years old, you should walk out, because that's not what we're looking for at that age. We're looking for play. We know that play is what develops the human brain adequately for long-term success. What doesn't work is strict academia and strict kind of sitting down and following the rules. That is not the way that the children's brains develop. So play is super important. The second thing you should be looking for when you're looking for a little play group for your little ones is supported teachers. So teachers who are in a network where they're fully supported. And in play sense, that's one of the things we prioritize is play-based learning and supporting our teachers. Another thing that you may or may not know about PlaySense is that it is home-based, which means that we can come into your home and run a school in your home. We put our teachers in your home. So I was one of those moms, we call them host moms, and I was a host mom. I had all of my children's play groups in my home. Didn't ever teach it because I'm not a good teacher, to little ones. But we had a teacher who we brought in, who then we trained, and she had the PlaySense curriculum. And then my little ones were obviously educated by her. So it's play-based, it's home-based, and it's really small groups, because part of that connection is very important. It happens in small groups, so 6 children to 1 teacher. So as we finish off this evening, I want you to consider your child's next step. I want you to think about PlaySense. We would love to welcome you. We've got a couple of spaces. Many of our schools are full now, but a couple of our schools do have places. And if you want to open a school in your home, please do get in touch. And you'll see that there'll be some information on that comes through tomorrow, that you can so that you can join one of our little schools. So with that, I am going to go on and I'm going to answer a couple of questions that have come through. And in fact, I'll direct them either to myself or Ayanda. So this one is from Bianca. She said, is it possible that my child struggles with self-regulation because of a lack of boundaries and discipline? So it is possible, because self-regulation is one of those things that does develop in the context of boundaries. Part of developing boundaries and discipline, and if you haven't done my boundaries and discipline talk, you're going to get a discount for it tomorrow. Please go and join it, because it really is amazing. Part of those boundaries is actually having a narrative and teaching your child to be able to manage their very big emotions in order to self-regulate their behavior. So discipline and self-regulation are very, very connected. So it is possible that a child would battle with self-regulation if they had no boundaries. So boundaries are very important for self-regulation. Then I've got another question here from Amy. She said, desperate for PlaySense in Pietermaritzburg, none here. Well, Amy, we are coming your way. If you would like to set it up in your own home, we have got teachers in your area who we can appoint to come and teach your little ones. So just get in touch tomorrow, and yeah, we can definitely do a little PlaySense group in Pietermaritzburg. Out of interest, how many of you are PlaySense parents? Can you just pop a little number 1 into the chat? And then we can see how many of your PlaySense parents. It would be really, really interesting. There we go. We've got a couple of PlaySense parents. Lovely to have you. Our very special parents who are part of our community. Lots of you. Excellent. And somebody's doing our PlaySense homeschool program, which is getting better and better by the day. We're going to be launching more and more content very, very soon. Okay, so then there's an anonymous person who says, my 3-year-old repeatedly does things like pushing somebody else, or pushing things out of my hand, or he'll throw his toys if he doesn't get an immediate response from us. He also doesn't want to hear, he needs to wait. How do I teach him to be patient? So Ayanda, I think I'm going to hand this one over to you. How can I teach him to be patient and not to hurt other people? My 5-year-old's very different, but can I expect my 3-year-old to grow out of it by the time he's 5? So he is really like pushing people and pushing things out of her hand. And is this age appropriate, and how does she teach him to be patient?
Yeah, so I think with things like that, it's very important to, obviously when it's happening, tell baby, don't do that. It's hurtful, or whatever words that you use. But what I really found is very nice in terms of teaching the young ones is trying to show them in scenarios where it's done to someone else, where you almost now find ways to talk with them and show them that is actually hurtful, so that they almost like can imagine, okay, they can't really can imagine themselves, I wanted to say, in the other person's shoes, but anatomically that's not possible in terms of the child's cognition. But so you want to almost do that. What I've actually learned to do is, try the kindness approach, where, almost always modeling the hugs. I really need a hug. I really need a take 5 to just basically try and deal with that. And maybe also just trying to get an idea just now from a mental health perspective as to where did that happen from? So if it's something that happened at school, because obviously children act out something that has been done to them, so you want to pick that up and almost like try to get to the root of where it happened. And then in terms of just trying to talk, I think it's so tricky when you work with babies because they're very young, in terms of just how much can you communicate? I find that acting out and having toys, little toys that you can work with in terms of just trying to paint the picture of what you're trying to show them is probably a better tool than really saying, that was very hurtful, you cannot do such things. But if you play around with it and say, how do you think Teddy feels if Teddy does 1, 2, 3, then it probably is a better way of just working towards that emotional vocabulary.
Love it. Very, very interesting. Ayanda, fabulous, fabulous advice. Moms and dads, we have run out of time. I can see that there are lots more questions, and I'm so sorry we didn't get to them all. And I see that one of you, many of you actually are actually homeschoolers as well, are homeschool parents. So welcome to you. And just thank you for joining us tonight. I mean, you have all stepped out there, and Ayanda said it right at the beginning, that just by being here, you have shown that you are parenting consciously. And I think that's the biggest thing you can do. Every single one of us fail as parents. Every single one of us get into bed at night and go, that wasn't my best parenting moment. But in those moments, we actually are doing our kids lots of favors. We're teaching them a lot about life. We are repairing our relationships after having fractured them, and all of those things are okay. The fact that you're here tonight means that you are being intentional. So thank you for being here. Thank you for parenting your children with such love. And so from us at Parent Sense, at Play Sense, and also from Ayanda as well, thank you. And also from Babies R Us, who was one of our sponsors. Thank you for joining us tonight. All the best with your parenting journey, and watch out for your email tomorrow, because you're going to get some fabulous, the winners will be announced from the competition, and you're going to get some wonderful vouchers as well. So all that is left for me to say, other than good night to you, is good night to Ayanda, and a huge thank you for being with us tonight. Thank you. Good night, everyone.